What if the discomfort you're feeling isn't a sign that something is wrong? What if it's a sign that something is ending? Not because you've failed, not because you're broken, not because you've taken a wrong turn, but because you've outgrown something. Maybe you've outgrown a relationship, a role that you've played for years, a belief about who you need to be, a way of coping that once protected you but now feels exhausting. Most of us don't realize we're changing while it's happening. We just notice that things that once felt normal suddenly feel heavy. Things we used to tolerate become difficult to tolerate. The life we built no longer fits quite the same way. And that can feel confusing because we're taught that healing should make us feel better. But what if healing sometimes feels like grief? What if growth sometimes feels like loss? What if becoming requires releasing? Today, I want to talk about one of the most overlooked parts of healing, the part where you begin to outgrow what no longer fits. The relationships, the expectations, the identities, the survival patterns, and even the version of yourself that got you this far. Because sometimes healing isn't about getting back to who you were. Sometimes healing is about creating space for who you're becoming. Welcome to Healing Beyond the Symptoms, the podcast that helps people discover the root causes of their health struggles and take back control with science, strategy, and self-awareness. I'm Dr. Leah Hahn, a chiropractor and functional wellness doctor who believes that true healing starts beneath the surface. So let's dive in. Today, we're exploring a topic that I believe sits at the heart of every healing journey, yet rarely gets talked about. We often begin healing because something hurts. Maybe it's physical pain or anxiety, or maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's a relationship that isn't working. Maybe it's a feeling that despite doing all of the right things, something still feels off. Most people begin a healing journey hoping to feel better. They want relief. They want answers. They want to get back to normal. But what if healing isn't about getting back to who you were? What if healing is actually about becoming someone new? What if the person you're becoming requires letting go of the person you've been? That's what I want to talk about today. Because one of the most profound truths I've witnessed, both personally and professionally, is this: outgrowing what no longer fits is how you move towards what does. And while that sounds beautiful, it can also be incredibly painful because growth requires loss. Healing often requires release, and transformation often asks us to let go of things we never imagined we'd outgrow. Healing changes more than symptoms. When people first come into my office, they're usually focused on symptoms: the headaches, the digestive issues, the stress, fatigue, the neck pain, the anxiety. And while symptom relief is important, something fascinating often begins to happen as their nervous system becomes more regulated, when it starts to reorganize. Their lives begin to change, not because someone tells them what to do, not because they're trying harder, but because they begin experiencing themselves differently. They start noticing things that they couldn't see before. The relationship that constantly leaves them feeling depleted. The job that's been draining their spirit for years. The way they abandon themselves to keep other people comfortable. The patterns they've repeated because they felt familiar. As awareness grows, life begins asking new questions. And awareness can be both liberating and uncomfortable. Because once you see something clearly, it's hard to pretend you don't. So I want to talk about the survival version of you. One of the things I teach frequently is that many of our patterns began as brilliant adaptations. The nervous system is always trying to keep us safe. When we're young, we learn very quickly what is rewarded, what's rejected, and what helps us belong. Some of us learn to become perfectionists. Some of us learn to become caretakers. Some learn to become achievers. And some learn to stay invisible. Some even learn to anticipate everyone's needs before their own. Some learn to disconnect from their emotions entirely. And again, these aren't character flaws, they're survival strategies. The body and the nervous system are incredibly intelligent, and they will do whatever they need to do to help us survive difficult circumstances. The problem comes when survival becomes our identity, when the strategy that once protected us continues running the show long after the threat is gone. The perfectionist becomes exhausted. The caretaker becomes resentful. The achiever loses connection with joy. The people pleaser loses connection with themselves. And eventually the body starts whispering, then nudging, then screaming. It says, there has to be another way. Your body is often the first messenger. I often tell people that the body speaks long before the conscious mind catches up. Sometimes symptoms aren't the problem, they're the message. The anxiety may be telling you something needs attention. The exhaustion may be asking for a different pace. The tension may be revealing a burden that you've carried for too long. The burnout may be your body's way of saying, I can't keep living like this. Now, I'm not saying every symptom has an emotional cause, but I do believe our bodies are constantly communicating. And healing often begins when we become willing to listen, not fix, not force, not judge, just listen. What is your body trying to tell you? What has it been trying to tell you for years? There's a grief that no one talks about. This brings us to what I believe is one of the most important and overlooked parts of healing: grief. When most people hear the word grief, they think about death. But grief shows up whenever something changes, whenever something ends, when something is no longer what it once was. Healing is filled with grief. We grieve the years we spent surviving. We grieve the opportunities we missed. We grieve the childhood experiences we didn't receive. We grieve unmet needs. We grieve relationships. We grieve old identities. We grieve versions of ourselves. And sometimes we even grieve the person we thought we would become. That grief can be surprising. I've worked with people who finally achieved a goal they chased for years, only to discover sadness waiting for them on the other side. Because healing and growth don't just reveal what we're gaining, they also reveal what we're leaving behind. I work with a woman I'll call Sharon. Sharon has been in a high-power corporate position for years. She was typically the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave. She was known as the person in the company as, if you want it finished and you want it done well, ask Sharon to do it. She came into our office with intense headaches that occurred at least twice a week. And when we evaluated her spine, we found a major C1 and major upper cervical pattern. C1 of the spine will often hold tension that resonates with the emotional pattern of overwhelm, or there's so much to do and not enough time. We worked with NSA to start unwinding that tension pattern, creating a release. And over the next several months, Sharon started to have a glimpse of a new reality. She realized that the high-powered career that she thought she had always wanted was draining her. She was burnt out, exhausted, tired of people-pleasing, and knew she wanted something different. And while this was the start of a new journey for Sharon, she also found herself grieving what felt like a loss of her old identity. I asked her to be with the grief, to acknowledge it. Within a month, Sharon gave notice at her job and was interviewing with companies that felt more aligned with her values. While this was an exciting and healthy change, it also took being able to grieve the loss of what she thought she wanted. Today, Sharon is headache-free and continues to develop a balance between career, family, and self-care. But why does grief feel so difficult? Many of us were never taught how to grieve. We were taught how to suppress, how to distract, how to stay busy, how to move on quickly, how to be strong, how to avoid discomfort. But grief asks us to do the opposite. Grief asks us to slow down, to feel, to acknowledge, to honor. And what can feel terrifying if you spent your entire life avoiding painful emotions? One of the greatest misconceptions about healing is that healing should always feel good, but it doesn't. Sometimes healing feels like confusion. Sometimes healing feels like uncertainty, not because something is wrong, but because something old is ending. I work with a woman that I'll call Molly, and Molly had what she thought was a great group of friends from high school that would get together each month. Molly had looked forward to this time. She spent hours with these friends, and she would get together and they would gossip and catch up. They often spent time evaluating, judging, and criticizing the people in their lives. And when Molly started network spinal care for low back pain and sciatic pain, she realized that she would actually get this pain every time she exercised, every time she bent down to grab something. And when we evaluated her spine, we found a lot of lower cervical and coccyx tension. And this can create patterns of fear and feeling like a victim to life and to circumstances. And as the tension patterns started to ease, Molly started to have realizations about how she spent her time. She realized that this friend group that she had maintained since high school was no longer a good fit for her. She realized that the gossip and interactions left her feeling drained and uncomfortable and stuck. She was able to sense the persona she often took on when she was around these friends. And while that had once felt necessary, it now felt false, untrue, and an incongruence with who she really was. Over the next several months, Molly stopped getting together with these friends, and she grieved the loss of the friendships, but also made a firm commitment to start spending time with people that left her feeling energized, positive, and uplifting. Realize there is a space between who you were and who you are becoming. There is a season in healing that I think deserves more attention, and I call it the in between. You no longer fit your old life, but your new life hasn't fully arrived yet. The old relationships feel different. The old habits don't work anymore. The old identity is dissolving, and the new version of you is still emerging. This can feel incredibly lonely, and many people mistakenly assume they're failing. They're not failing, they're transitioning. Think about a caterpillar. There's a period where it is no longer a caterpillar, but it isn't yet a butterfly. There's a middle stage, a messy stage, a dissolving stage, a healing stage, a becoming stage. And healing often looks just like that: messy, uncertain, uncomfortable, and completely necessary. And why do boundaries feel so hard? One of the first signs of healing is often the development of healthier boundaries. And boundaries sound wonderful in theory until you start setting them. And then they become uncomfortable. Because boundaries don't just change your behavior, they change relationship dynamics. The people who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not celebrate your growth. Some people will support your healing, others may resist it. Not because they're bad people, but because your change requires them to adjust too. And not everyone is ready to do that. This is where many people become tempted to abandon their healing, because belonging is a powerful human need. We would often rather stay familiar than risk disappointing others. But growth asks for courage. It asks us to remain connected to ourselves even when others don't fully understand. And there's a loneliness of becoming. So let's talk honestly about loneliness, because I think many people experience it during the healing process. You stop participating in conversations that drain you. You stop engaging in drama. You stop people pleasing. You stop overextending yourself, and suddenly things become quieter. At first, that quiet can feel uncomfortable. You may mistake it for loneliness, but often what you're experiencing is actually the absence of noise. the absence of chaos or constant distraction. And in that space, something remarkable can happen. You begin hearing yourself. Your intuition becomes clear. Your needs become clear. Your desires and your truth become clear. The loneliness slowly transforms into solitude, and solitude becomes peace. I remember working with a woman in her early 50s who came into our office initially because of chronic neck tension and anxiety and exhaustion. And as her nervous system began repatterning and reorganizing through NSA, she started noticing something that she had never fully recognized before. Every interaction with a close family member left her feeling drained, anxious, and questioning herself. For years, she had learned to keep the peace by accommodating, explaining, and putting her own needs aside. She believed it was her responsibility to manage that relationship. But as her body became calmer and she developed greater awareness, she began to recognize how much energy she was spending trying to earn approval that was never consistently available. Slowly, she started setting small boundaries and stopped answering every phone call immediately. She stopped defending every decision. She allowed herself to say, "That doesn't work for me." What was remarkable wasn't just the relationship and how it changed, it was that she changed. She became less reactive, more grounded, and more trusting of herself. The family member didn't necessarily become easier, but she no longer abandoned herself in order to maintain the relationship. And for her, that was one of the most profound forms of healing. She often described it as finally feeling free to be herself instead of managing someone else's emotions. So, what is the nervous system's role in this transformation? This is why nervous system healing is so important. Growth isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Your nervous system has spent years learning patterns of protection, defense, hypervigilance, patterns of survival. And when you begin changing those patterns, your system needs support because the unfamiliar often feels unsafe, even when it's healthy. So think about that. Sometimes peace feels unfamiliar. Sometimes rest feels uncomfortable. Sometimes healthy relationships feel strange. Sometimes slowing down feels threatening, not because they're bad, but because they're different. Healing involves teaching the nervous system that safe can feel different than familiar. That's a profound shift. I want to give you some practical ways to support your healing. So, what can you do? You can start small. Healing doesn't require perfection, it requires consistency. 10 minutes of journaling, 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of walking or breathing, stretching, 10 minutes of sitting quietly without distractions. The goal isn't performance, it's presence. Can you be with yourself? Can you listen? Can you notice? Can you create moments where your nervous system feels supported? Small moments practiced repeatedly become powerful. The nervous system learns through repetition, not intensity. I often think about healing like walking through a dense forest. When you've traveled the same path for years, the trail becomes obvious, even if it leads somewhere that you don't really want to go. It's familiar. Then healing asks you to create a new path. At first, the new path feels difficult. You have to move branches and step over roots, walk through uncertainty. The old path still looks easier. But every time you choose the new direction, the pathway becomes clear. Eventually, what once felt difficult becomes natural. The old trail begins to disappear, and the new one becomes home. That is how nervous system change happens, one choice at a time, one repetition at a time, and one moment of awareness at a time. If you're currently in a season of outgrowing people, places, identities, habits, or beliefs, I want to encourage you. You may not be falling apart. you may be becoming. The discomfort you're feeling may not be evidence that you're lost. It may be evidence that you're growing. The grief may not mean you're moving backwards. It may mean that you're honoring what was. The loneliness may not mean you're alone. It may mean you're learning how to be with yourself. And the uncertainty may not mean that you've made a mistake. It may simply mean you're standing at the edge of something new. As we finish today, I'd like to leave you with a few questions. What in your life no longer fits who you're becoming? What are you holding on to simply because it's familiar? What version of yourself are you being invited to release? And what might become possible if you trusted the process of your own evolution? Remember, healing isn't about fixing yourself. You were never broken. Healing is about uncovering who you've always been beneath the survival patterns, the protective layers, and the adaptations. It's about coming home to yourself. And sometimes coming home requires leaving behind what no longer belongs. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs the message. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review for the podcast. Your reviews help more people discover these conversations about healing, nervous system health, and living beyond the symptoms. Thank you for being a part of this community. If you're ready to explore what deeper nervous system support looks like for you, I'd love to connect. You can book a wellness consultation at bodyandbalancechiropractic.com, and we'll look at what your body needs to heal at whatever pace is right for you. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Honor the season that you're in, and trust that every time you outgrow what no longer fits, you're creating space for what does. And remember, you're not broken. You're patterned, and patterns can change. Thanks again for joining me today on Healing Beyond the Symptoms. If you've been curious about network spinal, or if you've tried everything else and still feel stuck, I want you to know this. Your body is not broken. It's patterned, and those patterns can change. If you're ready to experience how gentle care can lead to profound transformation, I'd love to invite you to book a wellness consultation at bodyandbalancechiropractic.com. Together, we'll look at what your body needs to finally release, reset, and thrive. Until next time, breathe deep, trust your body, and remember, gentle can be powerful.